Have you ever reached a point where your kindness stopped feeling holy and started to feel like a quiet form of self-betrayal? There comes a moment, usually in silence, when you see the truth behind your own smile. You realize it was not compassion that made you say yes again and again. It was fear. Fear of being unloved. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of what might happen if you finally stopped saving everyone. Carl Jung once observed that when a person begins to withdraw their projections, they stop being harmless. They become conscious. And consciousness, in a world built on unconscious giving, is the most dangerous thing there is. Because when an empath stops pleasing everyone, they don't become cold. They become clear. And clarity changes everything. But how does that clarity begin? Usually, with one quiet question that breaks the spell you have lived under for years. It begins on an ordinary night. You're sitting alone after another day of managing everyone's emotions, your body tired, your chest heavy, your soul quietly whispering, something isn't right. You replay the conversations, the forced smiles, the small betrayals. You remember how you said yes when you meant no, how you held space for everyone but yourself. And then, almost by accident, the question arises, what if I stopped? That single question is what Jung called the birth of consciousness, the first crack in the mask of your false self. It is not rebellion. It is remembrance. The moment your soul begins to wake up and whisper, "This is not who I really am." And once you hear that voice, there is no going back. Because the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. And the empath who sees the truth is never the same again. For most of your life, you have believed your sensitivity was a blessing, a rare gift that allowed you to feel what others could not. But if you look closer, you will see something far more complicated. Because sensitivity, when born from fear, isn't a gift. It is a shield. You learned long ago to sense the storms before they arrived, to read the tone in someone's silence, to decode every sigh, every flicker of disappointment, as if your safety depended on it. And in many ways, it did. You became the emotional barometer for everyone around you, the peacekeeper, the comforter, the one who absorbed what others refused to feel. But what you called compassion was often hypervigilance in disguise. What you thought was empathy was your nervous system's way of staying safe in a world that once felt unpredictable. Jung observed this in his patients again and again. He realized that much of what we call kindness is actually a refined form of adaptation. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your gift was not fate. It was survival. And when you finally understand that, something inside you begins to shift. Because once you see that your compassion was born from fear, you can finally start to love without it. And that is where the real transformation begins. But before you can love freely, you will have to meet what you have buried the deepest, the part of you that has waited for years to be seen. There comes a moment in every awakening when awareness stops feeling gentle and starts to burn. You begin to see the hidden cost of your goodness, how your light was shaped by the fear of your own darkness. You start noticing the resentment under your smile, the exhaustion behind your calm. And then it hits you, the truth you have been too kind to admit. You are angry. Angry at being used. Angry at how easily others took what you offered. Angry at yourself for calling it love. Jung called this moment the collision with the unconscious. The instant when Everything you have denied about yourself rises up demanding to be seen. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That darkness is not evil. It is the part of you that has screamed enough for years. It is the voice you silenced to keep the peace. It is the boundaries you never had the courage to draw. When you finally meet your shadow, you don't become cruel, you become whole. Because the anger that once scared you was never hatred. It was power, your power, buried beneath decades of pleasing. And when that power returns to you, everything begins to change. Because from that collision with a shadow emerges something Jung believed was sacred. The birth of psychological sovereignty. And it always begins with the first quiet shift in your energy. When the shadow has been seen, something subtle begins to move inside you. The energy that once flowed endlessly outward starts to turn back toward its source. For the first time, your own life force begins to feed you. You notice that conversations which once drained you now leave you untouched. You no longer rush to fix the tension in the room. You breathe. You let others hold their discomfort. Jung observed that this is the moment when a person stops living as a fragment and starts living as a center. Soon after, another shift follows. The mask you wore for safety begins to fall away. The smiling persona, the helpful one, the good soul who always held everything together, you begin to see it for what it was. Armor that once kept you loved. But masks suffocate the skin beneath them. And when they fall, what remains is fragile, raw, and real. You start saying what you mean. You rest when you are tired. You disappoint people and survive. Jung called this the death of the persona, a sacred death that frees the true self to breathe again. Then comes the moment when your vision clears. For years, you projected your own sensitivity onto others, believing that they felt as deeply as you did. You mistook potential for character and confusion for depth. But now, your eyes no longer see what they hope for. They see what is. You recognize manipulation where you once saw need. You see patterns instead of excuses. You stop rescuing and start observing. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." You finally understand that your frustration with selfishness was your soul asking permission to be healthily selfish too. As clarity grows, your boundaries take root, not as walls, but as living borders that protect your peace. You say no without explanation. You allow silence to speak for you. You realize that people who are angered by your limits were those who benefited from your lack of them. This is not cruelty. It is integrity. Jung called it individual wholeness, and it is the beginning of sacred selfishness. The understanding that you must include yourself in your circle of care. And then something unexpected happens. The guilt that once followed every no begins to dissolve. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop trying to make your needs sound reasonable. You start realizing that guilt was never proof of kindness. It was evidence of control. Someone taught you that love means obedience. But love without choice isn't love at all. Jung observed that when we integrate the shadow, we stop feeling guilty for being human, and that freedom, quiet and steady, becomes the soil for authenticity. From here, the path sharpens. You begin choosing truth over approval. You no longer perform emotions you don't feel just to make others comfortable. You speak with simplicity. You love with honesty. You withdraw when something feels false. And you notice how the world rearranges itself in response. Some will drift away, others will draw closer. Authenticity is magnetic, not because it pleases, but because it resonates. Then one day, you turn your gift of healing inward. You stop trying to save everyone and begin asking, what do I need? You care for your own inner child with the same tenderness you once gave to others. You rest instead of rescue. You nurture instead of numb. And for the first time, your empathy feels clean, not a performance, but a prayer. Jung called this the wounded healer's turning point, when the healer finally heals themselves. And finally, you arrive at a new kind of connection, one that doesn't cost your soul to maintain. You love without losing yourself. You listen without absorbing. You care without carrying. You can still feel deeply, but you no longer drown in other people's tides. You begin attracting those who honor your space, those who meet you where you are, those who know that love is not sacrifice, but freedom shared between two whole beings. These shifts are not steps to follow. They are awakenings that unfold in their own time. Each one dismantles a lie. Each one returns a fragment of yourself that the world once took. And when they have all taken root, you begin to feel something you have never felt before. Sovereignty. Not pride, not ego, but a quiet alignment with truth itself. You no longer need to be the light for everyone. You become the flame that guides your own way home. Every awakening has a price. The moment you stop living for approval, the world you once knew begins to dissolve. People who once praised your kindness start calling you distant. Those who leaned on your endless patience suddenly question your character. It feels like the ground beneath you is shifting, and in a way, it is. Jung called this passage the night sea journey, a descent into the dark waters of the self, where everything familiar disappears. You are not doing anything wrong. You are simply being reborn. At first, it feels like death. The death of certainty, the death of belonging, the death of the identity you spent a lifetime building. You will grieve relationships that were never real, rituals of giving that no longer make sense, versions of yourself that existed only to be loved. You may try to go back, to slip into your old patterns just to feel safe again. But something inside you won't let you. Once consciousness expands, it refuses to shrink. And so you drift between who you were and who you are becoming, between the comfort of the known and the terror of freedom. There will be nights when loneliness sits beside you like a ghost. You will wonder if you have made a mistake, if awakening is worth this kind of emptiness. But solitude is not punishment. It is initiation. Jung wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." This is what he meant. You must descend into your own depths so that your roots can finally touch truth. In the quiet, you begin to notice the faintest light under the water. It is the glow of your own awareness, steady and patient, waiting for you to stop fighting the dark. You realize the loneliness is not absence. It is space. Space where your true self can finally breathe. And slowly, without effort, you start to rise again. Not because someone saves you, but because you have learned how to hold yourself. When you emerge from those depths, the world looks the same, but you are not the same. The noise that once controlled you feels distant. The chaos no longer penetrates. You have faced your own underworld and come back carrying the one treasure the unconscious hides from everyone: inner stillness. The night sea journey is never wasted. It strips away what is false so that what is real can survive. And as the waves calm, a new kind of healing begins, one that doesn't happen in the mind, but in the body that carried your pain for so long. When the storm of awakening settles, you begin to notice something unexpected. Your body, the one that carried years of silent tension, starts to speak again. For so long, your body was a battlefield. Every yes you didn't mean, every smile you forced, every emotion you swallowed was stored somewhere in your muscles, your gut, your breath. Empaths often live as open channels, absorbing, processing, softening everything around them. But the nervous system is not infinite. It remembers every unspoken boundary. Jung observed that the psyche and the soma, the mind and the body, are mirrors of each other. He believed that true healing could never happen if it stayed only in thought. The body must remember that it is safe again. And so, without realizing it, your healing becomes physical. You breathe deeper, you sleep longer. The tension in your shoulders slowly loosens. The constant ache behind your ribs eases. You feel life moving through you instead of against you. This is what happens when energy that once served survival is returned to its rightful flow. Your body, once an archive of suppression, becomes an instrument of awareness. You begin to feel instead of react, to sense instead of absorb, to be in your body, not merely surviving through it. Many people talk about enlightenment as an escape from the flesh, but Jung saw it differently. He believed that awakening is not about transcending the human experience, it is about fully inhabiting it. Your body is not the enemy of your spirit, it is its expression. And as your mind clears, your body follows. The fatigue that once defined you starts to lift. The anxiety loses its edge. The inner tremor that once felt like danger reveals itself as the pulse of life returning home. When you stop carrying what is not yours, your body finally remembers what it means to rest. And in that rest, something sacred happens. You begin to trust yourself again. Because healing is not just freedom from pain. It is the quiet joy of knowing that your body and your soul are finally on the same side. When your inner world changes, your outer world cannot stay the same. The moment you begin to live with awareness, life quietly rearranges itself to match your new vibration. Some people draw closer, while others fade without explanation. It feels like everything is ending at once, and in a way, it is. Jung called this process differentiation, the natural separation that occurs when you stop mirroring other people's expectations and start reflecting your own truth. The empath's journey demands this shedding. It is not cruelty, it is clarity. You begin to see relationships for what they are, not what you wish them to be. Some were built on genuine love. Others were sustained by convenience, control, or unspoken contracts. You gave emotional care. They gave conditional acceptance. You offered listening. They offered need. But when you stop performing the old role, the contract dissolves. And suddenly, the balance reveals itself. Some people leave because they were never truly with you. They were with the version of you that made them comfortable. When that version dies, they grieve, not for you, but for what you gave them. This is what Jung meant when he said that growth requires the courage to disappoint others. You begin to understand that not every loss is punishment. Some are liberation in disguise. It is not easy. You will feel the ache of empty space where connection used to be. You will question whether solitude is a reward or a curse. But look closer. Beneath the silence, there is a quiet truth emerging. You are no longer chasing love. you are learning to receive it. And when love is no longer an act of survival, it becomes something pure again. Mutual, steady, true. Jung wrote that individuation always transforms relationships, because the more real you become, the fewer illusions you can sustain. Those who love you will grow beside you. Those who don't will fall away. And your heart, though it hurts, will thank you for the honesty. Because what remains after the purge is not loneliness, it is alignment. The beginning of a new kind of sensitivity, one that no longer wounds, but guides. At first, you mistake this calm for emptiness. You are so used to feeling everything that peace almost feels unnatural. But it is not emptiness. It is spaciousness, the kind that can finally hold truth without collapsing under it. You still feel the emotions of others, but they no longer move through you like a flood. You sense them, observe them, and choose what enters your heart. This is what Jung called differentiated consciousness, the ability to stay centered in the presence of another's storm. You start realizing that your sensitivity was never the problem. It was your unconsciousness you used to absorb because you didn't know you had a choice. Now, you feel without fusing. You care without carrying. You listen without losing yourself in their story. And from this new stillness, your perception sharpens. You read the truth beneath words. You sense intentions before they unfold. You discern the energy behind every smile. Your empathy, once chaotic and consuming, becomes conscious, clear, intuitive, almost surgical. This is what I call the alchemy of the empath. When emotion turns to insight, when compassion no longer drains you, but restores you. Because conscious sensitivity is not weakness. It is mastery. Jung believed that when awareness returns to the sensitive soul, it becomes a force of transformation, not only for the individual, but for everyone around them. And that is where this journey leads next. Toward the quiet revolution that begins when one person chooses to live awake in an unconscious world. When one person awakens, the world around them cannot remain asleep. Your clarity unsettles those who still depend on confusion. Your peace exposes how restless they have become. Your boundaries, once seen as rejection, begin to show others what self-respect looks like in its purest form. You start noticing it, the subtle shifts in the people around you. They begin to pause before unloading their pain. They start to mirror your calm. Some will resist it. Others will be drawn to it, like moths to a steady flame. Jung believed that individual transformation is the seed of collective change. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This is what happens when your authenticity meets the world. Your mere presence becomes catalytic. You no longer need to preach, to prove, to persuade. You become a mirror, and in your reflection, people see who they could be if they stopped betraying themselves. The world may still try to pull you back into its chaos, but you begin to see through it. You understand that unconscious systems depend on unconscious people. And every time you choose awareness, those systems weaken. You are not fighting the world anymore. You are transforming it simply by refusing to abandon yourself within it. This is the quiet revolution Jung foresaw. The rise of the conscious individual, not through grand gestures, but through presence, through truth, through the courage to remain whole in a world that profits from fragmentation. And from this new power, a way of living begins to take form, a simple guiding code that keeps your heart clear and your spirit is unbound. Every awakening eventually distills itself into wisdom, simple truths that no longer need defending. What follows are not rules, but reminders, anchors to help you live awake in a sleeping world. First, feel everything. Absorb nothing. Your emotions are sacred messengers, but they are not containers for everyone else's pain. Let what is yours teach you, and let what is not yours pass through. Second, give from overflow, never from depletion. Love offered from emptiness turns into resentment, but when you fill yourself first, your giving becomes effortless, an act of abundance, not obligation. Third, love others without losing yourself, care deeply. But remember that empathy without boundaries is self-erasure disguised as virtue. Fourth, help when inspired, not when guilty. If compassion feels heavy, it is no longer love, it is control. Give when your heart expands, not when it tightens. Fifth, trust your inner knowing over external pressure. The world will try to confuse you, to make you doubt what you feel, to make you small again. But intuition is the quiet voice of truth that never needed permission to speak. Jung called this way of being authentic living, a life guided not by fear or conformity, but by the integrity of one's own soul. When you live by these principles, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop searching for permission, and you begin to embody what Jung believed was the highest goal of life, to become a whole human being. As the dust of transformation settles, you begin to realize that awakening was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you were before the world told you to be small. Jung called this final stage the inner marriage, the sacred union of the masculine and feminine within the psyche. It is not about gender. It is about balance, the integration of two ancient forces that have always lived inside you, your capacity to nurture and your right to assert. For the empath, this union is revolutionary. You have spent years in the realm of the receptive, feeling, giving, softening, forgiving. Now, the other side of you rises, the side that protects, decides, and says no without apology. And when these two forces finally meet, you become whole, no longer fragmented between caring and self-preservation, between tenderness and truth. You realize you can be both, soft and strong, gentle and unyielding, open and boundaried. Jung believed that wholeness is not the absence of conflict, but the conscious holding of opposites. It is when love gains a backbone and strength learns to kneel before compassion. You no longer need someone else to complete you, because you have found the balance within. You stop searching for approval, because your inner masculine already affirms your worth, and your inner feminine already knows it. This is psychological wholeness, a state where every part of you has a voice and none of them need to scream, where the mind obeys the wisdom of the heart and the heart trusts the strength of the mind. When these two move together, you no longer live in survival. You live in rhythm, aligned, centered, alive. And from that center, a final realization dawns. The very truth your old self could never believe. When an empath stops pleasing everyone, they don't lose their heart, they reclaim it. They don't stop caring about others, they start caring about themselves too. They don't become selfish, they become sovereign. Sovereignty is not a wall. It is an inner ground, a sacred place within you where peace is no longer borrowed from others. It is the quiet knowing that your worth was never earned through sacrifice. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is what you have been doing all along, not becoming someone better, but someone real. You have walked through the fire of awakening. You have faced the shadow you once feared. You have buried the mask that kept you small. And now, you stand at the threshold of your own becoming, whole, awake, untamed. The world may still ask you to shrink, but you will know better. You will recognize the difference between love and dependence, between duty and devotion, between silence and peace. And you will live differently, not louder, not harder, just truer. Because the world does not need more selfless empaths bending under the weight of everyone else's emotions. It needs conscious ones, souls who give from choice, not compulsion, who love without losing themselves, who walk through life not as mirrors of others, but as living testaments of authenticity. So if you have reached this point, you already know. Your breaking point was never your end. It was your initiation, the moment you stopped performing love and began embodying truth. Welcome home to yourself.